of my patrons on Patreon. If you'd like to help support this channel, join the Discord server, and get early access to every video, consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/secondthought.
Loneliness.
Loneliness.
American epidemic.
Epidemic of loneliness.
Actually hurts you more than smoking cigarettes.
Debilitating levels of
loneliness is killing me.
Loneliness. If you've watched Bo Burnham's Inside, you've heard about it before, and experts say it's as
smoking. It's so cool.
Bad as eating 15 cigarettes a day. But what is loneliness really? And is it a problem? The answer to both of those questions is yes.
Because loneliness is a problem that has existed behind the shadows for too long. And I came to realize this when I first began my tenure as Surgeon General, and I traveled the country and would talk to people who would tell me that they were lonely, but they wouldn't use that word. They would say things like, you know, I feel I have to carry all these burdens in my life by myself, or I feel if I disappear tomorrow, nobody would care, or I feel invisible.
Don't feel anything.
Right, and it turns out that millions of people struggle with loneliness. So when you dig into the data, what you find is that about 1 in 2 adults in America is reporting levels of loneliness, and these numbers are even greater among kids. But what you also find is that loneliness has serious effects on our mental health and our physical health, raising our risk for depression, anxiety, and suicide, but also increasing our risk of heart disease, stroke,
We're gonna test if this is a
dementia,
poop
and premature
bark
death.
or if it's a I'm bored
Loneliness
bark.
is a massive problem that's only gotten worse. We know this because earlier this year, researchers published this paper. And these are the graphs they came up with. Using a national survey tracking people's habits on random days for 17 years, researchers found that between 2003 and 2020, people started spending a lot more time alone and a lot less time with friends, family, and acquaintances. Like you heard the Surgeon General explain earlier, that's a big deal. It's not like people are a little lonely so they feel sad for a bit and then happy for a bit and it all kind of evens out. We're spending a lot more time alone, which is bad for both our mental and our physical health. Everything from depression to dementia to heart disease gets worse the lonelier we are, and the data shows that's an increasingly large number of us. And while the pandemic brought this into focus and made things even worse, the researchers behind this study stressed that these trends were already there well before COVID started. We've been on this path for a while. So who do we blame? Smart.
We talked a lot about the phone. We talked about the way technology has changed our lives, made us a little more insular, even though we're connected in digital ways.
And technology has utterly transformed how we interact with one another. Now, look, tech can be good or bad. It can help us or hurt us.
Technology has transformed the way we live and work now, where these connections are happening on Zoom, online.
Phones. Could you stop that? Smartphones. In a lot of the interviews and public addresses you've probably seen about the loneliness epidemic, phones, social media, and technology in general get blamed, taking up a lot of airtime. And don't get me wrong, social media definitely has a bad effect on our mental health. We've known this for a really long time now, and just about every study we've ever done confirms it. For example, a study that came out just this year found that more social media time equals worse mental health. And as a solution, it recommends that, quote, social media users be cautious when interacting with social media features, especially likes, comments, followers, media, and posts, because of their significant effect on mental health. Yes, phone bad. But phone not only thing bad. While social media for sure has a role in this crisis of loneliness, something a lot bigger is either completely absent from or barely glossed over in these interviews. Something that socialists have known contributes to isolation for a long time. And that's alienation. For centuries now, socialist thinkers led by the dapper young Marx have anticipated that capitalism would produce the kind of acute loneliness we're experiencing today. And if you've heard about alienation before, watching these news segments can be a little frustrating. Before we explain what it is, alienation is a structural feature of our capitalist society. It's almost universal, and for the most part, out of our control. That's important, because when these reports downplay it or don't acknowledge it, which is almost always the case, it leads them to conclude that while loneliness affects a lot of people, it's ultimately an individual problem with individual solutions.
And finally, their personal practices. Look, in all of our lives, we can do simple things, like taking 15 minutes a day to reach out to and connect to someone we care about, to make sure that we are giving people our full attention when we're talking to them in conversation and aren't distracted by our phones. And
at the end of the day, as you say, the solutions are on us. It's on people, it's on individuals, on families, on groups of friends to do something. And these relationships do take work, as we're reminded. I feel like I'm in touch with...
Don't get me wrong. Personal practices to improve our isolation and our mental health are good things, and they're not the only thing in the Surgeon General's report or the interview I keep pulling clips from. Both do mention larger-scale approaches to this problem, like regulation for tech companies, government investment in community organizations, and improvements to public health infrastructure. It's not all bootstraps and get her dones. But a really large piece of the puzzle is still
Diablo 4 started an update.
missing in these reports.
Your dog is not having it today? I know. She's being especially unruly because Fiona is here. Because my brother's staying with me, as well as my mom, as well as my dad. So, she's like worse than yesterday. When yesterday she was bad, but like not this bad. Today she's worse. She started off the day by taking a fucking fat shit outside, which was great, and then taking another shit that was not as big inside her crate. Okay. So, you know, that basically goes to show how fucking dog shit the start of this day was overall. Yes, a very bad girl, not a good girl at all. Did she go out just now? Yes, she did. She did not poop. She peed. I'm going to give her water now that she has calmed down. Does she want to play with Fiona? Yes, but she's not allowed to because I'm not going to let her. That kind of doggy play needs to be completely fucking organized and completely monitored. There's no doing that on your own. At 6 months, it will become worse. I think at that point, she'll be fine. Yeah, you can fucking get mad all you want. I'm a goddamn ruthless authoritarian, okay? This fucking demon is slated to be like at least 75 pound plus. She's already almost 30 fucking pounds, and she's not even 4 months old yet. You think I'm gonna let this fucking chomping monster behave in the fucking way that she wants to? Are you out of your goddamn mind? Yeah. No, it's not happening, okay? This is already a very smart dog, which is already fucking annoying. I'm gonna do all of the right things to do. Monitor every single thing that she does. Make sure that every single part of her life is restricted, limited to my fucking desires. Because I don't give a fuck what anarchists think. Dogs are not fucking humans, okay? They need structure, they need organization, and they need to work on your schedule. They need a job as well. Okay? She needs to be trained like a fucking like a foot soldier. You are like a micromanaging chatter. Yes, that is precisely what you're supposed to do to dogs. Anything else outside of that, anyone that claims that that's not how you're supposed to raise a dog is wrong. And their dogs, they either got very lucky and you know had like a dog that demonstrates good behavior on their own volition, or they just have bad fucking dogs that they don't even realize it, and they constantly ask themselves, why does my dog do this thing that I don't want them to do? The entire point of, when you find yourself asking that question, that means you haven't properly trained your dog. Okay? And if you don't do that, and some dogs you get very lucky. Some dogs with age just train themselves. But yeah. Exercise, discipline, affection, in that order. Eggs, precisely. Precisely. All right, let's continue with this alienation video.
There's something else that's to blame for a big chunk of the loneliness we feel that can't be addressed by either individual practices or a little extra funding for community organizations. And that's capitalism, which, especially in its neoliberal variant, produces, thrives on, and actually even demands more individualization and the ever greater atomization of our society. Let me actually explain alienation. You'll see what I mean. On the economic front, capitalism is a commodity production system. That's the engine that keeps things running. Making stuff for the sole purpose of selling it for more than it costs to make. Profit-motivated production. The way this production is organized under capitalism is by class. You have the class of people who own the resources needed to produce commodities, and those who are hired to use these resources for the production of goods. Capitalists and workers. Employers and employees. What does this have to do with alienation? It turns out, a lot. In some of his earlier works, Marx identified that the way we organize work and production under our current system alienates us, meaning it creates a separation between us and four things: nature, work, others, and ourselves. Nature, because through the logic of commodity production, it's no longer something we're a part of. It's just this dead resource we extract from to make stuff. Work, because most people work for someone else in order to make something that the other person owns. You work in a Funko Pop factory. Once you're done making that Funko Pop, it's not yours to sell. You sold your labor power, but the product of it belongs to someone else. And then there's alienation from others and ourselves. In the labor market, we are commodities. Almost all of us sell 8 or more hours of our day to somebody else. During that time, we kind of stop being people and become just another resource that yields profit for our employers. That's already not great. Being reduced to this one thing for most of our waking hours, instead of being the complex, interesting human beings with different interests and emotions that we are, sucks. We're expected to just turn that off and compartmentalize while we're on the clock. We're interchangeable in the eyes of capital, and it's why so many people relate to the idea of being just a cog in the machine. That feeling of alienation is miserable and isolating. But it doesn't end there. Like, what about all the other cogs? As commodities in a competitive market, we're constantly pitted against one another, whether that's for job positions, promotions, or layoffs. There are always fewer jobs than people to fill them. And while you can be friends with your coworkers, in the back of your mind, there's always going to be a little voice that says, if the boss ever wants to fire someone, you'd rather it'd be them than you. Social cohesion is harder to come by in this zero-sum competition that decides if you get to eat this month. Also, when, in spite of the odds, solidarity and compassion do get realized in the workplace, and it takes the form of a union, capitalists are merciless in their efforts to turn workers against one another. Teamwork and collaboration are one thing, but solidarity terrifies them. Of course, real life is less binary than this. We make friends on the job, our boss can be a real-life nice person. But the built-in competitive element of labor under capitalism puts a strain on these relationships, and that's the problem. The way our economy is organized runs against our natural drive and physical need to socialize. It doesn't make it impossible, but it sure as hell doesn't help. And I've been talking for a while now, but we still haven't gotten the full picture yet. Not only does capitalism's reliance on a competitive labor force contribute to us feeling lonely at work, its demand for ever greater exploitation makes work a larger part of a lonelier life. If we go back to that study I used earlier, the one with all the graphs and the trends, this one, there we go. If we go back to this study, one of the main conclusions, literally the first line at the top of the page in this big highlighted box, says, quote, "Hours worked per week emerged as a structural constraint to social connectedness." In normal words, you work more, you feel lonelier.
Rise and grind. All men are created equal. Some just work harder. Now, if you want to be broke for the rest of your life, keep doing what you're doing. But if you want something different in life, you gotta do something different. You gotta go all in.
Your boss will always be trying to make you work more and pay you less. That's one of the main ways they increase their profits. If they do that by increasing your hours without touching your salary, you now have less time to socialize. If they do it by keeping your wage the same but reducing your hours, you now have less money to spend on leisure. Someone with a higher income may be able to pay for someone else to do their chores, while someone earning less has no choice but to stay home and do it themselves. Regardless, in either scenario, what decides how lonely you are is the threat of poverty keeping you at your job, and your boss taking advantage of that to either make you work more or pay you less. They can't afford to care if that makes your life worse. They need to be profitable. And if you're lonely because of that, that is not their concern. And all this is before we even get to the neoliberal part of the equation. You can add neoliberal culture and politics to these economic factors inherent to every iteration of capitalism. Neoliberal culture values things like self-reliance, rugged individualism, disdain for the poor and unfortunate, And of course, neoliberal pundits are constantly hammering on the myth that meritocracy is real, even though you can accurately predict a baby's future salary using only the zip code they're born in, their race, and their gender. And on top of the rhetoric, you can add
How come I never say any of this stuff? Because I am fake. I love capitalism. You got me. That's why.
Liberal policy.
I famously believe the opposite of what Second Thought believes. I went on his podcast, Deprogram, because I hate him. And I wanted to out him as a commie, which I have an ideological issue with.
Things like defunding social institutions, like schools, which are then forced to cut their arts and after-school programs. Or defunding public health institutions, where loneliness and other mental health difficulties could be treated. Or deregulating work, so your boss can work you longer. Set aside loneliness for a second and think of mental health more broadly. How many sources of anxiety, stress, suicidality, depression, anger, and misery do you think could be avoided if we used all the empty houses at our disposal to guarantee people a home, instead?
I don't know about that, but you can avoid the top of the hour ad break with just a simple $5 a month subscription, or a free one in the form of a Twitch Prime, or by getting gifted a sub, you know what I mean? Famously a tanky.
Let me read you some details off the list of these bills.
Thoughts on this guy being a tanky? I hope he fucking drives a tank to your house, okay? That's my thoughts on this guy being a tanky. Take a fucking week off and think about how stupid you are as a human being. I don't know what this video is. It's probably, you know, that was just a weak moment. I don't agree with anything this guy's saying, okay? I do agree with the top of the hour ad break, though, because I love capitalism. And that's the, you know, that's the best and only way to do capitalism is by serving ads at the top of the hour. Here's the ad break now. Get back to the Second Thought video. This dummy got bored, couldn't solve the puzzle, and is now just fucking freaking out again. What am I supposed to do? What am I to do? What am I to do with this fucking weirdo, dude? What am I gonna do with this, huh?
Instead of sitting on them until they turned a profit. How much of the mental health puzzle could we solve if millions of people didn't need to worry where their next meal would come from because we distributed food freely without bureaucratic means testing gumming up the works? How much of a load off someone's mind would it be not needing to worry about getting around when their car breaks down because of a robust system of public transport?
Just sent you a DM, let's do something. Just sent you a DM, let's go something. What?
When all of society is geared towards maximum exploitation instead of maximum well-being, of course mental health is going to suffer. Between the material incentives of capitalists that isolate us from nature, work, each other, and ourselves, and neoliberal insistence that we're alone in our personal responsibilities, combined with their policies that force us to be, it's a miracle we aren't even lonelier.
The solutions are on us. It's on people, it's on individuals.
But I forgot to mention another way this capitalist blindness further contributes to our isolation. Since the loneliness epidemic became part of the zeitgeist, employers have started using it as another argument in the long fight to bring workers back to the office after COVID. A bunch of companies, probably including the one where you work, have spent the last few years playing around with this idea that work from home is to blame for all the isolation and loneliness people are feeling. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's all those like, come back to the office, the culture here is so great statements every HR department is sending out. And I don't fundamentally disagree with their premise. Their execution is laughable, but work from—
I feel like I'm like giving Kaya weapons right now to just use against me when I give her water. I don't like that this relationship that I have cultivated with my dog is one full of warfare and it's a contentious one in nature. It's just like I shouldn't feel like giving my dog necessary resources for survival will inevitably fuck me up down the line. You know what I mean?
from home can be lonely. However, that doesn't mean going to the office is necessarily better, nor is being forced back the solution people want. We want our work to be less isolating, more meaningful. We want more time out of work to socialize. Most people want some amount of flexibility so they can stay at home part-time and go into the office every once in a while. We want to have the power to put our social lives and our needs before profit maximization. Most people want the ability to have a say in how policies are decided. But bosses don't want that. They want absolute control.
This is not an employee choice. They don't get to choose their compensation, they don't get to choose their promotion, they don't get to choose to stay home 5 days a week. I want them with other employees at least 3 or 4 days.
We've told people we expect them on May 17th, 1 or 2 days a week. Get used to it, get your head wrapped around it.
Fucking demons, dude. Demon-like. There's something very openly demonic about the way that they deliver this information. I can't be the only one seeing that.
Get your head wrapped around the fact that we may, if we can, the legal issues about requiring vaccines, but by mid-July, 50% will be back in. Obviously,
capitalists think working from home means working less. They already have a ton of surveillance tech on people's computers to police you at home. But of course, that's obviously not as good as putting you in an open space where everyone's eyes are on your screen, guilting you into never taking a break. That's why they're always talking about returning to the office. They don't care about loneliness. They care about their bottom line and power. They want to regain the control they lost when you stopped being in their line of sight 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. None of these guys are doing interviews saying, we work our people too hard and research shows that's making them lonely. We should really tone it down. No, they just want to tell you what to do and make sure you do it. Or, you know, they're real estate moguls and they're losing money with all these empty office spaces. Here's the thing. When we don't talk about all this, about how overwork, exploitation, and our disgusting politics of rugged individualism profoundly affect loneliness, we open the door to capitalists and their rhetoric. If we don't talk about work, they will, and they get it exactly backwards.
And they do.
They'll take this loneliness epidemic, this massive detrimental problem to our society, this thing that's making us miserable and literally killing us, and use it as an argument for more time in the office like they're doing us a favor. Don't fall for it. The roots of this problem go far deeper than they will ever acknowledge. And before I cut this video off, I want to reiterate something. If you know or suspect a friend is having a hard time with these feelings of loneliness, please reach out to them. And if you're experiencing loneliness yourself, please reach out to someone in your life, or a medical professional, or someone on the other end of a warm line to talk about it. Even with all this structural pressure around us, there is help available. It works, and you can overcome this. You are allowed to and deserve to feel happy.
We need more connection in our life. And that's how I want people to think about this. Loneliness is not a source of shame. It's like hunger or thirst, a signal that our body sends us when we need something for our survival, and that's social connection.
I mentioned at the beginning of this video that my channel is only possible thanks to my patrons on Patreon.
Another banger video from Second Thought. Bro, I'm lonely, but I have the HasanAbi chat for company, Hasug. No, you guys need more than that. A sense of community from an online space is one thing, but it's not enough like mental and emotional stimulation. Like, you need human beings in your life, okay? You do. And I don't mean that in a fucking workplace environment. I do not mean you need human beings in your life that are fucking, you know, that are talking to you at the water cooler. Oh, she clapped the second one too. Good job, Kaya. Good job. Good job. Good job. Going. Don't, no, go keep going. Oh,